So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, or good afternoon, depending where you're falling from. Thank you for joining us for the closing event of the EWAS project, Empowering Women in Alpine Skiing. For this session, we are honored to be joined here by Madam President Kolinda Grabar, who was the president of Croatia. We met when she was Deputy Secretary General of NATO, and now having done everything possible she could do in politics, she went into sports. And she's a member of EC, or International Olympic Committee, and the head of a chair of a group that chooses the next sites of the Olympics. And then we have Sarah Lewis, who is an Olympian. She used to be the Secretary General of International Ski Federation, now chairs the GB Olympic Association, and also chairs the GB Ski Federation. And then to question you and offer advice, we have Sophie Grizzi, who is a Greek coach, long experience. She has headed lots of Greek delegations in the Olympics and the World Championship. So we have a lot to talk about. I will shut up and give the word to start. We will start with few intervention, and then we will have Q&A. And Kolinda, off you go, to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Federiga. Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be a part of this very distinguished female group of speakers. And hopefully the audience as well, that includes both men and women, because without men, we essentially cannot change policies. I don't want to go on very long in my introductory remarks because I'd actually love to hear questions from you. But I have to tell you that sort of my entire life has prepared me for my career in sports. There's lots of other things that I do in addition to sports, but sports is always the leitmotif. I just love it. And I think you can see that. And also, having been president of Croatia, I've got to tell you that most people around the world still remember me for my cheering during the World Cup 2018. And they still remember me for good sportsmanship when Croatia unfortunately did not win gold, but we won silver to France. And embracing both teams and saying, okay, the battle in the field of play is over. And now what we do is what sports is all about. And that is embracing our differences, being together, celebrating in the victory, recognizing that everyone has done their best. But there's always somebody who will win, and there's always somebody who will not win. My whole life has somehow prepared me for that. I was born back in 1968 during the times of the former Yugoslavia in a rural area in the suburbs of Rijeka, Fiume in Italian. And I really, really wanted to. I was very athletic. I grew up with boys, so I played a lot of sports, including football, but many others as well, and which left me today with a jumper's knee and many other physical consequences. But nevertheless, even my father, who back in those times wanted to have a son, a little heir to his throne, he had to acknowledge and deal with the fact that he actually got a girl. So what he decided to do is to make the best of the situation. And then he taught me a lot of skills that in those times pertain to the male domain. And unfortunately, still today, people think of them as the male domain, such as survival skills, shooting. I never shot at animals. I always shot at targets. But I'm a really, really good sharpshooter, which helps me also to put myself and actually my physical aspects under control and to be able to focus and kind of do away with the unnecessary noise in the channel of communications. So as I mentioned, through being the only girl in my village and playing all of those boy sports. I think I realized I was a girl only when I started school and when I had to check one of the boxes, male or female. So, and actually during the period until adolescence, there aren't many physical differences in terms of performance between female and male sex. So it's only later that not just the physical differences, but also the kind of the social categories of telling you what is appropriate for girls and what is appropriate for boys put you in certain categories. But my whole life has been a lot about competition and focus, and being able to embrace others and being able to deal with personal defeat in a way that um, it's a lesson learned, but you move forward. Tomorrow's another day, and every fall is a step forward. And every door that shuts opens a new door and a new opportunity. And in order to be able to recognize it, it's just like reading a book. If you just keep reading the same chapter over and over, you're not going to move forward. You're not going to read the whole book. The same as in life. If you focus on your past, and if you focus on what happened rather on what is ahead of you, you won't be able to take the full advantage of the current and the future circumstances. So to tell you how I became an IOC member, during my presidency, I used to talk a lot to Thomas Bach, who was then the president of the IOC. And I told him that it'd be great if I could be an IOC member. So we started talking about it and working on it. And I am an IOC member. And not only that, I am the chair of the Future Host Commission. And I have to tell you, speaking about women in sports and sport government and governance and how we move forward, that in the last years and the last decade and a half, we've actually made quite a lot of progress, some steps backwards, but progress as well. Because if you look at the IOC membership today, out of the 106 members, there are 60 men and 46 women. So the share is 56.6% men and 43.4% women. And I think that out of all the international organizations, I believe this is the closest that we come to gender parity. And especially since having elected Kirsty Coventry as the president of the IOC, I think we are the first international organization with the kind of free elections where members vote, where this isn't a national quota or something. We have elected a woman for president. So I see a huge opportunity for this to be a driving force, especially if you compare it, for instance, to IOC honorary members. Those are the members who are past a certain age and then they're voted honorary members. So out of the 38 honorary members, there are 35 men and only 3 women. And with honor members, it's just 2 men, actually 3. One is has been suspended temporarily. But this goes to show that in the past, the IOC was associated with gray-haired men, and now we're almost there. And when it comes to the commissions, we do have parity. 50% of the commission heads are women, and 50% of the membership of each commission are women. And I have to credit Thomas Bach for that, but also Kirsty Coventry, who has started this new process of Fit for the Future. So we're looking at all aspects of the Olympic movement in order to really boost inclusivity and really boost the Olympic movement as the movement that moves the world ahead. Bless you, by the way, including boosting the role of sports as the tool that goes across 13 of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So it's a transformational tool that not only enables people to be physically fit and to achieve Olympic or any other sports goals, but really works towards the physical and mental health and well-being, not just of every individual, but of communities as well. Because sports is really where we can and have to get together. And sports is really what provides us all with focus. I have seen it with my children. I have 2 children, a boy and a girl. And we started enrolling them in sports basically since the moment they could walk, gymnastics, and then swimming and skiing, ice skating, karate, whatever. We provided every opportunity for them. We're thankful that in Croatia, sports is easily accessible to most people. It's really not expensive, and there are ways that most people, most children who have some kind of a logistical support can enroll into sports, serious training, and serious opportunities of becoming a competing athlete. And sports at the grassroots level, the European model of sports, which I hope that we can replicate elsewhere as well. So there's so much more that I can say. But, before giving the floor back to you, Federiga, I just want to say that looking back at my whole career, diplomatic, political, or when I was just trying to make a living by translating, interpreting, teaching languages at schools, etc., there's one huge lesson that I have learned is that people rarely remember your policies, whatever you've done in your life, but everyone remembers the way that you've made them feel. And this is what sports is very much about. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kolinda, this is an excellent start of the conversation. I would go to Sarah for also a short presentation, then we can start the conversation and ask questions. Sarah, off you go.
Thank you, Federica. Again, I really am truly honoured to be in this webinar with you, former president of Croatia and esteemed IOC member Kolinda, and together with Sophie and Federica. And I'm focusing during the input that I'm going to give today a little bit on leadership of women in sport, which I've had the opportunity to do, one of the, let's say, early movers in that respect. And it's fantastic to see now how things have evolved and in such a positive way. And I do feel as though I've helped to contribute to that, and we'll come to that. But my journey in skiing began in an unlikely place on a dry ski slope just south of London. And like you, Kolinda, as a kid, it basically, there wasn't an issue about gender. Sport was gender neutral when I was a kid. I did everything as well. I played football. Especially, this was my favorite sport, still is, I have to admit. I did gymnastics, judo, table tennis, all at a good club level. And there wasn't an issue about, you can only do girls' competitions, because everyone just did everything together and fought together and played together. And boys and girls did sport together. And what I found as a child, which continued throughout my life, my career especially, is that actually being sporty and understanding sport, knowing sport, being passionate about sport, being able to talk about football with everybody opened a lot of doors. Sport opens a lot of doors. I would not have had the opportunity to talk to the former president of state of Croatia if it wasn't for sport, you know, and here we are. We're able to talk to each other. We have an immediate connection where we're able to empathize, we understand, and we have, similar, we know that we share a similar interest. So this for me is something, sport is an incredible door opener like that, and immediately gains you a certain acceptance. And especially when, you know, I started working in sport, 35 years ago, then it was very difficult for women, for girls, to be able to kind of be treated with a certain respect and, well, you know, she knows what she's doing. You know, it's like, oh, you know, what does she think she's doing? You know, it's a woman. This is a place for men. But anyway, so back to my dry ski slope just south of London, and I became the first woman from that environment, from learning on a small ski slope, 90 meters long, made of plastic, to then compete for Team GB at a Winter Olympics. And like many athletes of my generation, I worked alongside my sport to fund it. There wasn't any form of grants or support as there is now. Fantastic programs in place from UK sport, but that experience of negotiating my own apprenticeship at 16 years old, of learning by doing, and building relationships, working in the ski industry, you know, that really became a foundation for my leadership career. And when I retired then from competing after the 1988 Calgary Games, I started my own company, based on the network that I built up, and the knowledge that I gained from being very much involved in actually running this small import and distribution agency, and was able to do many different interesting projects across the ski industry, with running courses, working for Eurosport, with commentary, with expert commentary, just after they'd set up, brand new, writing for ski magazines, doing public relations and marketing projects, and many different interesting things. But alongside that, as a volunteer, I managed my initial junior squad, which was the English regional junior squad. Now I'm a non-executive board member of that organization. But then 2 years later, I became the first professional Alpine director at the British Ski Federation, which had been an entirely amateur organization beforehand. So this was also a bit like being a founder of a new startup, because it was brand new. There was no precedent. There hadn't been other shoes that I was stepping into. So you had to be the CEO, the COO, the CFO, and the cleaner all at once. You were doing everything. But it taught me also how to lead with limited resources, with very high expectations, and a deep sense of responsibility for the athletes and for the coaches. And 4 years later, that role, being on the circuit, being part of the World Cup, World Championships, undertaking my technical delegate qualification, and being really involved in the international circuit, that role led me to the International Ski Federation. And I guess, as you can imagine, there weren't very many other women who were traveling with World Cup teams, standing on courses, being in competition juries, getting involved. So, yeah, I had the opportunity there to be noticed, and clearly I did the job well, and I knew I had done the job well and was confident about doing so. But at the International Ski Federation, I initially took on a role in a technical function. So the qualification level for the World Cup, Olympic, World Championship series, known as the Continental Cups, 5 of them all across the world. A role that I served for 4.5 years, which was was just fantastic, running competitions, preparing them. And again, this was another new role. This was another founder role where I was working together with some colleagues from World Cup, from technical delegates in establishing common rules for all of these competitions, and then creating a pathway through to the World Cup. So again, another new role where a blank piece of paper, but an opportunity here to really, help evolve the sport. And again, another 4 years later, the then Secretary General became the president of the organization and subsequently an IOC member as well for many years. And I was appointed as the Secretary General, a role I served for 22 years and had the opportunity to work in a number of different IOC commissions. Of course, we worked very, very closely with the IOC administration, with many members, with the International Ski and Snowboard Federation. More than half of the program of the Winter Games is overseen and carried out at a technical level by our federation. So throughout that whole journey of my work within a federation and association context, having began as an athlete, then running my own company. So I guess from an athlete to an entrepreneur to a global sport executive, there's been a constant thread of learning, because each time I was stepping into a new role, I had a fairly blank sheet of paper. But how to lead, and with purpose, with integrity, and with inclusion. I had really respected the fact that I had these opportunities to be included, and wanted to make sure that was the way that I continued to lead. And I believe that leading in that capacity, it's not about being the loudest voice in the room, although sometimes you need to, but it's about creating trust, about empowering others. Took me a few years to work that out, I have to say, and opening doors so that more people, especially women, they can step into spaces where decisions are made. So along these lines, perhaps some further points and some more details that I'm looking forward to exploring as part of this webinar today.
Thank you very much. I have to admit, I also discovered I was a girl after in adolescence. The first time my best friend actually beated me in a fight and realized he was becoming stronger than me. And I wonder, Sophia, this was your experience as well, right? But okay. Now, talking of which, let's go to the hot stuff. Kolinda, you want to comment on the recent, we were discussing before, a recent International Olympic Committee decision on transgender athletes?
Yes, yeah. Thank you, Federiga. I mean, I don't know if Sophie has introductory remarks, but this is, I think, the right time to talk about it, because all of us, and listening from what Sarah has said, all of us have learned about those physical differences through our particular experience. Again, I knew I was a girl, because especially my mom, whom I credit for so many things in my life. But when I would come home at the end of the day, all dirty for playing in the dirt with the boys, she used to say, "Oh, you're a girl, you should be more careful," etc. And I used to yell back at her, "No, I'm not a girl. I'm not a girl." I didn't know how to define myself at the time, but I just kept saying I'm not a girl, because I didn't want to be any different from the boys with whom I played. But the fact of the matter is that the science, the physical abilities, it does show that we are different. So as you all know, the female category has been part of discussions for quite a while now. And there was the previous IOC, I'm just going to quote, IOC Framework on Fairness, Inclusion, and Non-Discrimination on the Basis of Gender, Identity, and Sex Variations back from November 2021, which basically left it to the international sports federations to determine when it comes to athletes who define themselves in a different way. And here we have to distinguish between sex, so biological sex, and gender as a social category, as each person has the right to define themselves. So it was up to the IOFs to define who was eligible when it comes to those athletes who were either transgender or had some kind of chromosomal DNA variations, etc. And it was obvious that it became a very controversial topic, something in between actual science, biological science, and human rights, and that we needed to take a different path in order to protect the female category. So about 50% of persons in this world, not to discriminate anyone else, but just to make sure that we have an equal and fair field of play, first and foremost. And secondly, or even more important than the first aspect, is to protect every individual from potentially being physically harmed by someone who had a biological advantage due to their sex. So when it comes to the IOC, so we're talking about biological sex, which can be either female or male, and is determined on our characteristics and the genes that we carry, XX or XY. And then there can be some variations. So back in September 2025, the new IOC president, Kirsty Coventry, and by the way, this was a hot topic during the presidential campaign for the IOC as well, fairness in the female category. So the IOC established a working group specifically to examine scientific, medical, and legal developments ever since 2021, ever since the first policy was developed. And this group was very wide. It came from 5 continents. It came from specialists that included sports, but that included also science, endocrinology, transgender medicine, sports medicine, women's health, ethics in law, human rights, of course, and athletes themselves. And based on all of these consultations, and first and foremost, based on scientific evidence and scientific findings, there is a new policy now that was issued just last week, and that is called the Protection of the Female Women's Category in Olympic Sport and Guiding Considerations for International Federations of Sports Governing Bodies, where for the first time, actually, the IOC sets a very clear policy on the participation of every single individual based, again, on their biological sex. So the science shows that the male sex confers performance advantage in all sports events that rely on strength, power, and or endurance. And that if you carry an XY chromosome, XX, or some variations of XY that are DSD that affects biological males who have the SRY gene. With rare exceptions, those athletes, they have the male reproductive organs and testosterone levels in the male range, and the majority of them are androgen sensitive. What does it mean, to put it very simply in everyday language? Those individuals experience testosterone bouts at 3 different stages: in utero, which is kind of a sort of pre-adolescence. Then after they're born, and then in puberty. And those testosterone surges actually bring about different characteristics between males and females that give males a very strong advantage, which means that they have larger and stronger skeletal muscle and bone. They have larger and stronger hearts, larger lung size, more blood cells, and lower body fat than females. And especially if those athletes went as male or men, or defining themselves in the terms of gender, and were using that as they were training, they were actually building the capacity that could not be annulled or reduced by the former policy, which actually asked for reducing testosterone levels for at least a year. And then it was considered that the athlete was capable of entering the field of play. However, again, science shows that development and training through life has built these advantages for the male sex, and that we need to ensure for the female category, for women to be, first of all, to feel safe in the field of play, especially in contact sports, and second, to feel that they have not been disadvantaged, and that they don't feel discouraged. Oh, I'm not going to compete as an athlete in Olympic sports because there's other individuals who had physical advantages before me, and I just cannot beat them. So now for Olympic sports and Olympic competitions, and just for the female category, and I need to really put an emphasis on that, because this does not mean banning transgender or any other athletes from competition. No, this just refers to female category at Olympic events, such as Summer Olympics or Winter Olympics or Youth Olympics, etc. And all other athletes who do not test as female as per genetic testing can compete at the Olympics in other categories, that is the male category. That does not refer to grassroots sports. And also, they can compete in any sports that are sex or gender neutral, where those physical advantages do not really matter. So this is very, very important to say. And the policy is going to be implemented in the course of the next 2 years. So it will come into force for LA 28 for the first time. And in the meantime, we're going to be having workshops with international federations and NOCs and everybody else to make sure that the policy is implemented fairly, that everybody understands it. And of course, we're going to be very mindful and take into considerations all human rights issues, etc. The testing is required, it's once in a lifetime, unless it's dubious, unless the individual still claims that there are some exceptions to the sensitivity of the male hormones. Then there will be further testing, but the testing is non-invasive. It just requires a swab or a blood sample, no other testing. And once the individual is confirmed as a female in terms of their sex, they can proceed. And if they're considered to be in between or clearly a male, then they can go through a further process. And we're going to be refining the process. But I think that this is very important, because we talk about clean sports. We want to see sports that is clean of any political intrusion, that is clean of corruption, that is clean of doping. And I think this also means for women a fair field of play, that it means clean of any physical disadvantages by other competitors, that had been gained earlier in life or simply biologically by these testosterone spurs that have been clinically and scientifically proven that they enhance all of these physical capabilities that I mentioned that are part of the male sex.
Thank you very much. Does any of you want to, Sophie, Sarah wants to come on this, and I would also take the chance to remind the public from home, which is substantial, that you can ask questions, put in the chat, in the Q&A will be comment. We would love to hear from you. Does anybody want to?
I would only add that when I was competing, we underwent a gender verification test, as it was called then. And in fact, it wasn't only a once in a lifetime. I competed at World Championships in 1987 and then at the Olympic Winter Games in 1988. And on both occasions, it was necessary to do that. And it wasn't a traumatic experience or intrusive. And we understood that this was a standard part of the procedure that we had to undertake, similar to doping controls, and went through it. But clearly, it hasn't been in place now for a number of years, and it's been introduced in some sports. Athletics has had it as part of its procedures for some years. So being the largest of the summer sports, there's already here a clear understanding and a clear acceptance. And it's a case of rolling that out and having the consistency across other sports.
Thank you. Well, even in skiing, as you know, the finals, they ski for the speed events. They ski on the same on the same slope, on the same track, and you can't, even if the fastest women rank usually among the top 10 in the men, there is still a substantial difference top to top. Sophie, do you want to say something?
I want to say that I am amazed from these presentations, and I thank you very much for that. I wanted to ask Kolinda on her way up to the IOC, how much did diplomacy and politics impact the lobbying process she had to undergo to get actually today's position?
Sophie, thank you very much for the question. Actually, I wasn't really lobbying that much at all. I've been always perceived to be part of the sports movement. I mean, it was at the time where the IOC was looking to widen the scope of the membership. So the membership, first of all, again, I have to credit Thomas Bach with the fact that he really wanted to bring more women in, but not just from sports, from all walks of life, because sports connects everything. And as Sarah said, sports open all doors. And I've seen that in my political career as well. So some people ask me, how come you're an IOC member and you were never an athlete or an Olympian? I think that is, from my perspective, it's an unfair question, but I still explain it in the way that I told you I was very athletic as a kid, but there was no way that I could seriously train in any sports to become an athlete. I mentioned sharpshooting. My father trained two women in his life. One is me, And the other one actually became, one of his former girlfriends, who became an Olympic champion for the former Yugoslavia and got the Olympic gold several times. So I might have had the chance, but her family had moved to Belgrade, and I was stuck in the suburbs of Rijeka. And this is one of the main points why I wanted to be part of the IOC, to make sports accessible to everyone, every single kid who wants to practice. And we're still looking for ways to do that. Because under former Yugoslavia, it was communist or socialist, whatever you want to call it. However, I was 15 kilometers away from the center of the city of Rijeka. My parents worked from early morning until late at night. I did not have the infrastructure. I had no one to take me to practice, to be able to seriously take up any sports and become an athlete and compete in the Olympics. And I don't cry over the spilt milk. I love sports. I continue, and as Sarah said, just being able to discuss sports in detail. And when people realize, oh, she knows the stuff. She doesn't know just all the athletes, the most famous ones, or their shoe size or particular details, but she knows the field of play, and she can discuss it in not just football, but many other sports. Then you really get respect. And you kind of become part of the crowd. And then when they realize that you can actually beat them at sports, like shooting is one of those sports that is not defined by sex. So it doesn't matter whether you're male or female. There is no physical advantage. So it's a fair competition. And even though I don't practice, I'm still able, and with all my vision problems, I'm still able to beat a lot of people, including a former president of the Croatian Shooting Association. It's not the federation, it's an association. And quite a few Croatian armed forces generals. And there was a lot of stuff about that around in the media. So I kind of, and also, as I said, the fact that I was cheering for athletes, that I did the best that I could, being in the stand and not being afraid to walk into a crowd of the other team's supporters anywhere in the world. When people see you, that you come without, well, the personal detail was there when I was president, but they were very discreet. But that you're coming to embrace them, to sing the same songs with them, to take photos with your flag, and they hold their own flag, and maybe you tie the two flags together. It really gives you kind of a reputation around the world that, yeah, you're working what sports should really be about, and that is bringing people together, inclusion, giving everybody an equal chance and opportunity. And for me, this is what I talked to Thomas about. I really, really want to contribute to the development of sports as grassroots and the European sports model, which I think is the fairest in the world right now, where we do give the opportunity. We start from grassroots and then we go to the top where you make the money, but you want to redistribute that money because, yes, you do need money and finances in sports, but also to be able to give a fair opportunity, even when we talk about the selection of the new hosts of the Olympic Games. It's not about infrastructure any longer. It's not about building buildings that will not serve its purpose afterwards. It's about sustainability in all of its terms. It's not just about protection of the environment. It's also about inclusion of socioeconomically disadvantaged people, inclusion of women, promotion of female sports, a promotion of female athletes, and involvement of women and everybody else in the governance of sports. So no, I think it's just I have always, and as I said in my introductory words, as a former president, you don't know whether to love it or regret it, that wherever you go, people still remember you but for being, you know, that president that stood in the rain and cheered her team and got completely wet together with her team, but was embracing both teams. So again, it's not about policy or politics. It's really about how you make people feel. And what I love to do is to make people feel welcome and included, but also respected. And I also, for people and for girls to learn from my example, if I could have done it with parents who barely made it through elementary school, living in quite a disadvantaged area in every sense of the world. And then, you know, being at the top of the world in the sense of being able to talk and meet with any political leader at the time. I know it's from President Xi to President Trump during his first term, President Biden, President Obama, to Putin. It's not a very particularly popular fact nowadays, but the fact that he treated me as an equal, it just goes to show that the fact that I was competing not for a medal, but competing for the sake of proving myself and my goals, just gave me that kind of self-confidence where I did not care whether the person across me came from a big or a small country. I always show them the same respect, and I always expected for them to show me the same respect.
I have a question for you from the public, Kolinda, but first I want to hear from Sarah.
Yeah, this leads me into a topic that I feel is really important, and that is global leadership and cultural diplomacy. And, you know, you've just put it on the table there. I mean, I feel a little bit humbled in respect with the world leaders that, you know, you had to face and you had to stand up to, and admire you greatly for that. That's for sure. And I think leading internationally, from my own personal experience, it requires more than technical competence, although you've got to have technical competence. It requires technical competence, but it requires cultural intelligence. And you just can't lead globally. And I think it's true in any context, but without understanding the context, the hierarchy, and the way that people and their cultures work. And diplomacy, it's really about balancing curiosity to find that out with respect. You know, it's knowing when to push and then when to step back. And in that way, you can build trust. So I had the opportunity after I concluded my role at the International Ski and Snowboard Federation to work with China to support their preparations for the 2022 Olympic Winter Games in Beijing. And that required a lot of patience. You mentioned President Xi, and respect. You need to show work ethic, and this is something that I have never had a problem with. But that we had a motto within the team, which was spare no effort. And I learned new levels of sparing no effort, and clearly to understand their hierarchy and to earn trust before offering, in a very diplomatic way, some solutions, and importantly, to the right people. Languages, and I mean, admiration for you conducting this webinar in the most beautiful English. Languages are also a huge asset. Speaking multiple languages, as we all do in this seminar, is a huge plus. And I recognized that very early, and once I joined the International Ski and Snowboard Federation in Switzerland, insisted that colleagues only spoke to me in German until I became fluent. And that opened doors, it built credibility. I could already speak French, but I really wanted to understand and to speak the local language. And so yeah, to sum up, perhaps some advice that I would give for leaders in this respect is do your research. Listen before you speak. Show that you're genuinely interested in other cultures. Luckily, I am, and that helps. And from a tactics perspective, sometimes the best outcome is when others believe actually that your idea was theirs, and that's how to win certain battles. And
my usual advice to my students is learn languages. You are so right about that. There's so many doors. I have a question from the public here, and it's for you, Kolinda. What about the history of the Olympics changing a shooting event to exclude women after a woman won the gold medal in that event? That's it, the man did not. And I'm not an expert on shooting, so I'm not completely sure to what it refers.
I'm not really sure what the question refers to. As we speak, perhaps whoever sent the question can really elaborate a little bit on that. Yeah, as I said, shooting is one of those sports where really it's about stamina, it's about focus, and yeah, there are gender again and sex categories, but nevertheless that this is where more or less we can have an equal field of play. I don't know, maybe it comes from my own experience where, again, I beat all the men that I ever was in a shooting range with in my life. Perhaps I still haven't met my match in that sense. However, I will also say the other part of my experience, and Sarah touched a little bit about it, knowing when to step back. There is I love these t-shirts and socks with a message. So many of them, like beware of the power of a girl with a book by Ruth Ginsburg, the late justice of the Supreme Court, etc. And everything on girl power, and some of them are not really for quoting publicly because of the language that they use. But I have a t-shirt that I was wearing when my daughter graduated from Harvard in cum laude in chemistry and molecular and cellular biology. And the t-shirt said, "Don't follow in my footsteps. I run into walls." And I do. But I think, this is what kept me succeeding, because sometimes, it's best if you can take a really balanced decision. Like when my daughter comes to me and comes with a sheet of paper which has these graphics of the where I'm starting and where I want to end, and there's 3 different ways how can I get there. I look at those and I'm completely confused, because this isn't how I've been used to making decisions in my life. Sometimes you do it just on impulse and you have to do it. And once you've made that decision, you shouldn't really regret it, but learn from it. And from what I've learned, also there these and that came when I was Minister of Foreign Affairs, and I was one of the most popular at the time political personalities in the Croatian public, because I was a relatively young, really young female, 36 years old, working very hard. My ministry was very young, Ministry of European Integration, more than 50% women. So we were really gender balanced, and the public really, I was enjoying huge approval rates, but that really disturbed a lot of people in the political cycles. It's tough competition, sometimes very unfair, just like in sports. So we have to work towards make it a fair field of play. So as I was going through a very difficult period in my political career, I had other options, but I persisted. Some people were telling me, "Why don't you resign?" And I said, "No, I'm not going to resign. Let the guy who's in charge, he can dismiss me, and then he can explain to the public why he dismissed me, that it's not for ego or personal reasons, but whatever the reasons were." And that one of my advisors in my office told me, you know, in psychology, there's basically the reaction of fight or flight. So you either fight it to the end, or you just, you know, run away and you leave the whole thing. And I thought about it and I said, well, you're not exactly right. There is a third option, and that is wait it out. Wait, and things are going to change. And actually, I turned out to be right in that particular situation in my life where the circumstances did change, and where really, as Minister of Foreign Affairs, I was being harassed in every possible way. Even my family was threatened, only to learn a couple of years later that it was the silver lining, because I was excluded from this inner circle, which they all ended up in jail. And the Prime Minister walked out just several months ago. He spent about 14 or so years in jail. This is the first time that I think I'm talking about it a little bit more publicly, because I said that for as long as he was in jail and in prison, I wasn't going to say anything. That I was waiting for an opportunity to face him directly and ask him, okay, tell me what the real problems were. Let's discuss it now. 15, 20 years later, but I didn't want to contaminate the public space, and I didn't want to put myself down by using the same kind of language or the same kind of vehicles in order to fight him. And on the other hand, flight was not an option. I do not run away from responsibility and difficult situations in life. It's really true. What doesn't kill you makes you strong eventually. That eventually might come a little bit late for some people, or it might take a lot longer. But with every other challenging situation later in life, I realized that, yes, it did make me stronger, that I was able to position myself in those circumstances where if I was excluded, I could decide whether to just wait, fight, or take the flight, or you know, build the networks and actually ask for help, which is also one of the options, a very genuine one. And I think when it comes to the participation of women in sports or in any other field, that help, that support, the networking, but genuine mentorship and really standing for including women, not just saying, okay, you know, I'm for gender parity, but do it in your own office. When I was president, 50% of my appointed advisors were women. I could not influence those whom I inherited in the office as career diplomats or career workers in the state system. But it was my deliberate choice to look at the pool of talented women, which is often overlooked, to say, okay, these are competent candidates and competent individuals who can perform a certain function equally well or even better than their male counterparts.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I'm still trying to understand the question. I do have a question, which is the opposite of what Sophia asked you. You know, I guess you have to use a lot of your diplomatic abilities, especially in your role of a chair of a future games, right? Because there, I guess you have pressures of all sorts, right? Plus, you have to take into account climate change for what is at least concern the winter games. So, can you give us, you know, a few ideas where we're heading? There's so many. I mean, we know where the next two games are going to be, but there's so many options on the table and things that are talked about. So, if you can share anything.
Yes. Well, I'm the chair of the commission for the summer games, but nevertheless, of course, the eligibility and electing future hosts is something that I've been dealing with now for a number of years. And when it comes to, at least for the Summer Games, we have a range of candidates from multiple continents, and we don't comment on the future host, potential future hosts in public. We leave that up to them. But what I can say is that diplomacy really taught me how to manage differences, and sports taught me how to turn those differences into a common purpose. So as we're discussing who is going to host the future games, this isn't about the infrastructure any longer. And it's especially not building for the purpose of the games, a one-time event that's going to last for 3 or 4 weeks. And then we wonder what we're going to do with the sports facilities. And with Winter Games, it's even more important. The Summer Games, a lot more sports, a lot more infrastructure. But with Winter Games, it's very important because the way that we used to do it earlier is to take winter sports out of their natural environment. So a lot of infrastructure was being built in the areas that even at the time, and especially today, have to rely on artificial snow or nothing whatsoever. They've just been abandoned because their purpose was just to serve the Olympic Games. Nowadays, we really have to preserve winter as such. So we have to work on the existing facilities and build temporary ones and look at meaningful communities, even if it means sort of decentralization and multiple locations. Like Federiga, sorry, where did you disappear? I'm sorry, a bit of a distraction, but
Sorry, the cat was marrying. I had to open the
chairs, obviously. I was trying to ignore it for a while, but it's become impossible. But anyways, so we have to focus on the communities where we can, where first of all, preserve nature, the environment, preserve winter, and bring winter back so that we have winter as such. And then look at the local, what is it that we contribute to local communities, culturally, historically, touristically. So in terms of having meaningful projects, and it will mean, so we have the next, we're okay with hosting in the future, but for a while I was afraid that it's going to happen in some artificially made tubes where we can make artificial snow, etc. No, we're going to continue working in that direction where we use either the existing facilities or build new ones, but just a small number of them and meaningful ones that will contribute to local communities in the places where it does make sense, where it's going to benefit the local people and local economies. So now the Olympic Games and the choice of where we go has become part of a larger legacy process. And you've mentioned climate change. So if you look at the contenders for the Summer Olympics, if we look at climate change and the temperatures and the humidity, we could eliminate at least half of them right now. But we don't want to do that. It would be completely unfair. We're looking at ways how to deal with climate change. And decentralization, again, is one of the ways forward. Second way forward would be looking, and we've been doing that with international federations, changing the sports calendar so that the Summer Olympics actually, or the Olympics, take time if they happen in the Northern Hemisphere in the months that are traditionally not considered to be the summer months of July and August, when the Olympic Games traditionally take place. And when evaluating future hosts, we have been evaluating the benefit of the whole project, of how it's going to benefit local communities, how it's going to contribute to inclusion, not just the women and socioeconomically disadvantaged, but also people with any type of disabilities, people who are considered to be foreigners in a certain environment, and bringing that into a regional aspect. I've heard, during discussions, I've heard some people say, oh, it's a small country, they can't host. No, it's first of all, there are no small countries. Geographical size and the size of your population does not limit your ambitions and what you want to achieve and what you want to do. You go well beyond your borders in order to achieve the goals of sport, but the goals of inclusion. I see a lot of, for instance, if you build temporary facilities for the Olympic Games, why not dismantle them and then donate them in a community, if not in your own country, but somewhere across the world, build a stadium, build a sports arena where people are completely disadvantaged for the lack of these sports facilities, just as I was as a kid, because I didn't have the logistics to be able to get to that infrastructure and be able to train sports at the level where I could become potentially an Olympic athlete. And another thing that I wanted to mention, Federiga, before we close and before we go, and this is all connected also to future host, etc., is what do we do when athletes, when their careers are over as competing athletes? So in some sports, you make a lot of money. Not everybody, but if you're a top athlete, you make a lot of money. But in other sports, even if you win Olympic gold, several times in a row, it still doesn't mean that you've made a lot of money, especially in Olympics where the Olympic competitions where there are no, you cannot be allowed to wear your sponsors' logos, etc. So there are so many restrictions. What do we do with people who are 20-something, 30-something at the top of their physical and mental ability, and they have to transition into other careers? So we really have to think a lot more. And I think, when this process for the IOC, the restructuring that we're going through is over, I'm going to be insisting a lot more on the life of athletes after the competition, after the Olympic sports or any other sports. Because from what I've seen in life, it's so tough for many of them, and especially for women, when they have business proposals, when they want to open their own companies, set up their own projects. The reaction is usually, oh, I know you, you were a great athlete, you won so many medals, but you missed so much school, you've got it up here, but do you have it there? So I really would love for all of us to get over that prejudice that just because you missed school, you did not learn appropriate experience, and shift and focus to the experience and the knowledge that was gained through sports, through competition, through fair competition, first and foremost, how these individuals can further contribute to their societies, either in business or politics or sport governance, etc. So to provide opportunities for additional training or business opportunities and startups, especially for women. I find that women are, they encounter a lot more of that kind of prejudice of, do you have enough brains and enough knowledge to pull a project? And that we have to put a lot of focus on that. And, the well-being of athletes is in the center of everything that we do as the Olympic movement. But we have to continue to do that once they exit the field of play as athletes who are competing for medals, and they enter the field of play as athletes who are competing in other areas, including to set up a financial framework for the rest of their lives and the lives of their families.
That's very important. There are two models, and one that may be of interest. One is the European Union dual careers model. Some of the projects we did before were actually on that. And the other one is the US ski team that is actually partnering with the business partners to give national team members the possibility to have internship and things like this. And then, of course, the NCAA collegiate sports of the US. So yes, I do agree. It's very important and it to invest in that part. But allow me one last question. We had the Olympics at home, and then we had the Paralympics. And frankly, I was blown away by the Paralympics. It was so amazing. These athletes are over and beyond. I mean, they're going down on the Tofan and the same World Cup and the Olympic course and everybody else, maybe with one leg or with neither legs. And they do need more support. And do you think, I know logistically it would be a nightmare, but do you think it could be possible to start thinking about one event with everybody, all normal, I don't know how to say it in English. I mean, regular Olympians and Paralympics, the same opening event, the same venues, the same facilities, For some sport, it might be more feasible than others, but I think we should really push to go there. And also, what can the Olympic movement do to help these people who gain even less money, have even less visibility, and still have all the needs of, and have exceptional needs, and they're still put in the same work of regular athletes.
Yeah, Federiga, thank you for that. It's a hugely important question, and yeah, I have huge respect for Paralympic athletes. I complain of my issues, my shoulder problem or my knee issues, etc. I'm still able to move around, and these people are competing in very competitive sports, and they're really achieving wonderful results, unimaginable. And they're beating nature, they're beating the adverse circumstances that brought for their injuries, or congenital factors that contributed to it. They're beating the whole world, and they're showing they are an example that regardless of the physical limitations, there is always that space where the will and the support of the community comes in to help you achieve much better results. When it comes to merging, and Andrew Parsons, who's the president of the Paralympic movement, is a really valued member of our commission on future hosts. However, at this point, I don't think that Paralympians want to be merged with the actual Olympics. I think they want to continue with Paralympics. In my opinion, the time in between the closing of the games and the opening of the Paralympic Games is a little bit too long. And I think that the biggest problem is that people around the world lose attention. They go elsewhere. Some people actually in Croatia, they take their holidays, their vacation time during the Olympics so that they'll be able to follow all the Olympic competitions. But you can go beyond 2 or 3 weeks. So Paralympics are always at a bit of a disadvantage, like female sports as well. And I've been thinking of ways that we really want to contribute more to the visibility of the Paralympics, because that sets a huge example to everyone. Don't give up in life just because you have a physical or any other limitation. Just, look for ways how you can move forward. But without the support of the community, in Africa, they say it takes a village to raise a family, to raise a kid. It does take a village. It does take a community, because if you work hard, if you're talented, no matter what, if you don't have the support of your family or anybody else around you, your school, your coaches and everybody else, there is a chance that you're not going to make it, because you can't do it. You cannot do anything on your own in life. There's always there needs to be that support network. in terms of those who will encourage you, sometimes literally carry you on your shoulders. And we do need to rethink the whole concept. We're rethinking now the Youth Olympics as well to make it more meaningful, but with utmost respect to the Paralympic movement and for them actually to give us proposals and give us their thinking of what they think that we can do in order to bring about more inclusion. One of the things that I learned from, I'm just going to mention, for instance, the World Cup in Doha in Qatar 3 years ago, where there was a huge attempt of inclusion, at least of the spectators who were disadvantaged because either of hearing loss or vision issues, or kids who were on the spectrum. So for them, it was difficult to take crowds or noises or anything that would disturb their normal routine. And we've seen some wonderful examples of sensory training and sensory merging or demerging, like blocking the sound and different measures that we can take in order to make it possible. First, to start with spectators who come to the games and who won't be limited by their physical capability, whether they're going to be there or not. We're not just talking about ramps and elevators. We're talking about a whole range of activities and measures that we can take. And again, this we can learn only from the participants themselves, from the Paralympic movement, and continue to discuss this within the process of reforming the future host selection.
Thank you very much. For the Youth Olympics, if I may suggest, it takes only 2 years. So some years go and some years will never get to go there because of the odd years in the birth. But this is a technical detail. Anyway, Kolinda, thank you so much. This was really, really interesting. And I look forward to seeing you in LA and hopefully before.
Hopefully sooner.
Yeah, hopefully sooner, yes. We also want Zrinka back at winning.
Yes.
So tell her we are rooting for her.
Thank you.
And I hope to see you soon again. Thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you for the people who followed us for the whole time. This is the last event of the EWAS project, which was funded by the European Union. We did a lot of work for empowering women coaches. We're hopefully going to continue for some more work in the future. I will keep you posted. Thank you very much and take care.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.